Cool. Well, we are all live and going. So let's hop in. First off, thank you to our panelists who are here tonight and everyone joining on Zoom, joining on Facebook Live. We'll also be recording this and putting it out later if you want to listen in. Um, Feel free to write any questions for the artists, for REM5 members in the chat on Zoom or on the Facebook live stream, and we'll try to check in on those. Or Amir, if you see anything and want to throw them into us, that'd be great. Some extra eyes. Um, Awesome. Well, tonight we are here to chat with a couple of REM5 VR artists about the different tools and techniques that they're using to expand their creativity into literally a whole nother dimension. I'm Brian Scalick. I work with REM5, wearing a number of hats, but mostly marketing and event work. And I've also helped build up our ESC event, which is the Experiential Sensory Collective, which everyone on the panel here tonight has participated in. What that is that's our extended reality event. So virtual reality, augmented reality, and then the larger general extended reality, where artists are trying out new things to make your world a more interesting place. So just to get a better feel of what that event looks like, I'm going to share my screen real quick and watch the recap from just this last February's event. So grab that quick. All right. If that beat doesn't get to toe tapping, we got to figure something out.
Oh, it didn't come through the Zoom
Oh
audio,
no.
unfortunately. Yeah.
Okay, well it's a really good song, so I'll
Yeah,
share it.
no.
I'll share it out afterwards. But um, you get a sense for it. It's a heck of a party. We've got a lot of people. We had over another second event, over a dozen artists using a whole number of techniques. And if you can see on my hat, a very wishful ESC 3.0 coming this fall once we can all emerge back out of our houses. So we'd love to see you there. If anybody has any questions about getting involved or wanting to learn more, you can reach out to me or just get in touch through social media, and we can talk more about that. So with no further ado, let's kind of go around and meet all of our artists. So let's start with Philip. If you guys just want to give a quick little rundown, introduce yourself, and talk a little bit about some of your projects that you've done in VR, and even just a little bit about your journey into VR, real quick, and we'll start with Philip.
Alrighty. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me fine? Good.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, great. I've been a longtime artist experimenting in light art. I've done rainbow pyramids. I've done public art at the airport, including giant 60-foot image boards. I was introduced to VR through REM5 and Brian last spring, and I painted a 3D painting that looked 3D. And so I took as my first experiment, taking that 3D painting and make it into a virtual experience. And then I've also made a larger scale experience. It's been just super fun, and I found it an easy leap to go from painting foils and painting with my camera and video to using Tilt Brush Pro. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Philip. Great to have you. Yeah, getting to know Philip a couple years back, he seemed like a great candidate to kind of transition into using these digital tools, and it just makes a ton of sense with his work. And it's been really cool to see him dive just completely into it. So we'll come over to the next corner here. We've got Mr. Star Wars, Matt Foreman.
Hey guys, my name is Matt Foreman. I am creative technologist over at Pixel Farm in downtown Minneapolis. And I kind of have an unconventional path into the VR realm, I guess. I graduated with a mechanical engineering degree and had always done game development on the side. And I decided I needed to do something a little more creative. So I just kind of branched out into that realm. And yeah, that's going really well. Doing a lot of VR projects at Pixel Farm and a lot of my own stuff as well. Just kind of interactive, immersive, not necessarily always VR, but definitely some kind of interactive experience is always what I'm interested in.
Yeah, if anybody gets a chance, and we can link it afterwards, but check out some of Matt's other work. And that's kind of the cool part of our ESC. What we're doing is it's not just immersive and in headset. There's a lot of cool stuff that's interactive and just using technology in really cool ways. So we're really excited to have Matt kind of be a part of our group. Really good source of knowledge.
If there's some extra time at the end, I do have some stuff I can share with everyone too.
Yeah, that'd be great. And then we'll hop down to Sheila. If anybody joined us last week, we had a really good conversation that goes further into depth of all of her work and kind of how she got into VR and into REM5. But I'll let her take it away and reintroduce herself.
I'm Sheila Asato, and I'm a visual artist, a book artist, and a dream artist. So I work a lot from dreams, and that's been a core part of my creative process since I began in the arts. I also work a lot internationally. So I lived abroad for 20 years, and I still maintain a really active connection with my contacts in Europe and in Japan. So a couple of months ago, just in October, I was introduced to REM5 by the St. Louis Park Friends of the Arts. And they thought because of my interest in dreaming and working with imagination and image-based realities and other states of consciousness, they thought it was a very good fit to try out virtual reality. I knew absolutely nothing about it and was totally amazed from the very first time. And I've been really especially interested in Tilt Brush. I've tried a couple of other programs, but there's so much to Tilt Brush that I've just said, don't introduce me to anything else for at least a couple of years because I'm busy with that. But I also love teaching, so I'm really busy trying to cultivate curriculum that I can eventually teach related to what I'm doing at REM5. So I hope to hear from some of you and maybe teach some classes on this.
Awesome. Always good to see and hear from you, Sheila. So for kind of the next round of questions, and actually quick shout out, our boy John down there is another one of the ESC artists doing a lot of really cool work. We'll hopefully get John on maybe the next panel and get to dive more into his work too. So for kind of the next few minutes here, I've got a lot of questions that are for kind of the group as a whole, and you can think of them in terms of VR creation or larger interactive immersive works. And then I've got kind of some more pointed questions for each of you too. So if that's cool, we'll just kind of bounce one out to the group as a whole. I'm kind of wondering, especially because the three of you have such different approaches and backgrounds, what are some of the stuff that you're either seeing or working with that makes you really excited about the future of kind of the path that you're on, or some of the stuff that you're seeing in the larger scope of extended reality artworks?
Well, for me, I find that I don't have to worry about physics, cost, structural engineering. Anything I have in my imagination, I can create. So I can create things that are huge in terms of width and height, and multiple rooms. That if I try to do it in reality, it would cost millions of dollars. So I find the ability to think big and be able to create big to be really fascinating. The second thing is that I really love the idea of immersive art, where somebody's not looking at a painting as something different than themselves. When they're in it, they are a part of the artwork and they can experience it directly. And I find that to be a really wonderful aspect of what I'm doing.
Awesome.
Yeah, speaking of immersive, it'd be about 25, almost 30 years ago now when I was living in Tokyo. I was doing an exhibition in Tokyo, and I was just so disappointed that this show that I'd taken a year to produce, that people would come in and just walk past work and maybe pause for at maximum of 3 or 4 minutes. And I became very jealous of friends of mine who were authors and musicians because people would at least read a chapter before they would put a book down, or they would at least listen to one entire song. But with the visual arts, getting them engrossed and sustaining attention was really a problem. So I kept thinking about, and I had dreams about creating these big, huge paintings that people would be able to step inside of and move around and push back and forth. And at that point, there was nothing like virtual reality. I mean, there was film, but it wasn't what I was looking for. I wanted something where they could be physically in it. So when I came back to the States in 1999, I discovered the book arts. And I thought, oh, now here is art that people can hold in their hands and they can open and close and move the pages. So it was more immersive than anything I could do before, where they would usually not be allowed to touch my work. It would be up on the wall behind a frame. But when I found out about virtual reality, it was like bringing people inside of a dream and having them be able to walk around and with their own volition decide what they want to explore. And to me, that's really exciting. Plus, that it's such a new medium, and as much as I try to look, I've never found anything written about how to do art in this new form yet, especially now with tilt brush. There are tutorials, but there isn't much out there yet. So as a teaching artist, this is really exciting. But the other part, which I hadn't expected, which I'm finding really interesting, is although when we're in virtual reality, we have a headset on and we're really totally in our own little world, with events like the collective at REM5 and that, I've been so impressed about the opportunities for intergenerational connections, especially connecting with a lot of younger artists, where before I was feeling a great media divide, that a lot of their experiences of art school had been so digitally oriented, where mine was all very much about using actual paintbrushes and everything. And so that has been really exciting for me.
Awesome. Yeah, the really good points, especially with the intergenerational and just remembering that a lot of this is on the forefront. We're all figuring it out as we go for the most part. So,
Yeah, and kind of adding to what Sheila was saying, one of the things I'm really excited about for the future in terms of VR and general connectedness is shared experiences and multiplayer experiences are on the rise for VR. It's kind of taken a while because there didn't used to be the player base for it, but now with things like the Oculus Quest, it's a lot more accessible, and this gives us the ability to create in VR together. So that is something that I'm very excited about.
mhm. Awesome.
Well, and that reminds me of something that I'm really excited about, and I don't know what will happen with it. But a lot of my audience is still over in Japan and Europe, and the possibility of through virtual reality being able to share work with them easily as long as they also have a headset is really appealing. And I look forward to that opportunity in the future.
hmm Um, yeah, Matt, let's hop back to you. I think as far as between the three of the artists here, a little bit of background for everyone. Philip and Sheila have been really diving deep into Tilt Brush, which is basically a VR painting application. Uh, you're using your hand to basically do brush strokes in volume and in 3 dimensions, which is really cool. Philip alluded a lot to being able to be immersive and kind of create whatever you want, which having no boundaries is I think exciting for everyone. Um, but Matt, on the other hand, you play in kind of a little bit of a different space between some of your work that I've seen for building virtual space in programs like Unity, and also some of the interactive stuff you've done for Pixel Farm. So maybe actually this might be a good time to showcase a little bit of that work, and we can talk a little bit. A question I have is a lot of people talk about wanting to get into even building stuff from scratch or really building VR from more of a programming side. And if you could speak to that of where people could start, I think that would be really helpful too for a lot of people out there
Yeah.
watching.
Yeah, absolutely. So before I show anything, I'll just explain things a little bit.
Yeah.
So I primarily use Unity game engine to make anything. Sheila and Philip and John, they have a much more artistic hand than I do. I can't really paint and tilt brush that well, at least not to their level. But my creativity kind of comes in my coding and designing an experience from scratch in Unity. And it seems a little daunting at first because for interaction to happen, you need to learn C# coding language. But I think that you shouldn't be intimidated by this because there are plenty of tutorials out there on how to just start to get into this stuff. And once you kind of figure it out, it's just like putting together a big puzzle. You think of something you want to do, and then you figure out the certain ways you can do it, and just try and approach and see if it works. And it usually messes up a lot, but eventually you get it working. And Unity is what I use for VR projects as well as just regular interactive experiences. I use the Microsoft Kinect for body tracking. It tracks your head and your hands, and that way you can interact with something on a screen in front of you. But basically, Unity can be thought of as another creation tool. If you're looking to get into it, there are plenty of free tutorials on YouTube. Brackeys is someone that I highly recommend if you want to start getting into it. That's actually where I started when I learned Unity about a year and a half ago. And I can show you guys some of the stuff I've done with it since then. And I think I'll start with the last Experiential Sensory Collective event at REM5. I created an experience called Subaqueous, which basically the point of it was to make the user feel like they were underwater and part of sea life. Their hands, you move your hands in front of the screen and you're controlling these sea turtles swimming around, and schools of fish kind of avoid you. There's a little snippet of it in the video that I'll play real quickly. So it's just kind of, you're in front of the screen, you're moving your hands around, and you can see the turtle there and there. And basically, it's one turtle per hand, and the turtles kind of swim around and zoom around, and the fish get out of the way. And that was using Kinect body tracking. And there is another little interactive installation that I did called the Pinstallation, which uses the same technology, actually. So I'll play this really quick. Well, that was fun. A lot of wacky characters, and that one was not just me. That involved the team at Pixel Farm here, and I had a whole team of artists and designers who were helping me out with this one. And essentially, they were providing me with assets and drawings and characters and things like that, and I would pull them into Unity and essentially bring them to life. We used a bunch of short throw projectors and just made this really awesome thing. And one other thing I want to show that involves body tracking is this light robot that I'm working on. This is just a prototype, but when it's all said and done, it'll mimic your movements. And this is also, believe it or not, driven by Unity. So it can be used for things other than just on a screen. So the top one is mimicking my head movements, and the other two are mimicking where my hands are pointing. And in the end, I want to make this into kind of like a robot guy, like maybe let an artist weld something together that looks like this crazy robot and then put these lights on for the head and hands. So all of this stuff essentially is creative coding, if I had to describe it.
Yeah, awesome stuff. I got to see Pinstallation live, and that was so much fun, and people loved it.
That was a fun one. That was a really fun one.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Matt. That I think gives people a better overview, kind of how that ties into this world, and like you said, yeah, more of the creative technologist versus like the pure artist role, and how everything's kind of blending together, and nobody wants to get stuck in a box. So we're all just using the tools we have to extend our creativity.
And
Um,
it's really powerful when every one of these different backgrounds gets together to work on one thing.
mhm. Yeah, that's awesome. So I
So
wanted
I'm
to.
very excited about the idea that Unity and Tilt Brush can be unified so that you can have interactions that are done by the game engine within a tilt brush, and also like being able to activate sound. So I think that that's the next kind of threshold for me, is to figure out how to bring tilt brush to life using Unity.
And everybody who was wondering, the YouTube tutorials that Matt mentioned, Amir just linked those in the chat. So feel free to go to that YouTube user to figure out more of that. Um, yeah, Philip, I wanted to bounce to you quick. We kind of connected over the use of light in our artworks. Um, and I wanted to chat a little bit more about how that extends into Tilt Brush because, like you said, you're able to create things that glow and have certain, hues to them and colors and temperatures to create these spaces. Can you talk a little bit more about how that thought of light and color has really transformed, your work in Tilt Brush?
Yes, back in 2015, I did a Northern Spark light installation that was called the Rainbow Pyramid. And it was a great idea until I had to figure out how to use light as a sculptural material. And I figured out how to use acrylic tubes that were clear and a frame. And I made a 20-foot by 20-foot pyramid that was made out of these acrylic rods, and then with LED lights. And so the idea was to allow people to see it from far away, but also be able to go into the middle of it. And I had mirrors on the floor so they could see down as well as up. Uh, and it took me months to create, and so that got me on the path of thinking about light as a art form that could be used. And so with Tilt Brush, like I'm also very interested in this idea of immersive art. I do have the images of the video of the caves that I could show, or I'm sure if you have, Brian. Can I
Yeah,
share?
yeah. If you want to try to share, and if it doesn't work, I'll double check that I can pull something up. So
Shoot, I'm not seeing it.
that's so good. I've got it right here. One of the walkthroughs that
Okay.
I cut. So I'll share screen, and I think you might be able to just talk over it because I don't think this one
Yeah.
has music. So let me give this a
No music.
shot real quick here.
So essentially, I wanted to create a multi-room light experience that people could walk through, actually by using a teleporter. And so each room is about 15 feet high by about 15 feet wide by about 20 feet long. And it's using the different brushes within brush to create different colors and translucent, pulsing shapes and forms.
Awesome. Look at us go. That screen share worked really well. um,
Yeah,
but yeah, I can speak to being inside of this, and it's so next level of having this journey that you're really taking someone through, and just the scale that you're able to create at was really something else. And as everyone can see, it's like being able to play with colors and shapes and just everything that is so out of this world. I'll pull this down real quick,
I
but
can't see it,
Brian,
Brian.
we can't
So
see
for
anything.
those on Zoom, it is showing on the Facebook live stream. That's where he's showing it, but we can't see it on Zoom.
interesting. It's always something. Well,
Yeah.
let me.
So one of the things that was really fun about this is that you go through these rooms, and then you go through a black hole, and then suddenly you're standing in the middle of space, which is kind of mind blowing to people. And one of the things I do UX design as well is really understanding the ways that people operate within an artwork. And so there's with the teleporter, you hit a trigger and you leap forward. But some of the novice people would just leap right into a middle of a wall, and or leap right into space, and then they'd be dangling in space. And so I really had to coach some of them. Oh, there it is.
I spoke too soon, but good. It's coming through now. to some extent, it sounds like. Stop sharing because I think my internet's getting mad at me. Everyone's still here?
That's
Everyone
awesome,
good? Okay, good.
That's really
Yeah,
cool.
so you know, when you see it as a film, it looks like you're floating through. But you know, I had one person go through and it spent 40 minutes because each room is such an experience that there's no rush. Some people want to just meditate in one room. And so I think that is kind of a contemplative experience as opposed to like a game where like, you know, snakes might be coming out and you're kind of doing a fight and flight. I think that this kind of experience is much more joyful and kind of meditative as well as beautiful.
Mhm. Awesome. And then so kind of hopping over to Sheila real quick, and you had mentioned it, and we have a little bit more from your previous talk, but you working with dreams, you've had a big connection to how dreaming and being inside a virtual space have a lot of similarities. You want to chat a little bit more about that and kind of the comparison and contrasting between the virtual space and the dream world?
That's very interesting. So, both the deep dreaming we do while we're in REM sleep, we dream in all different states of consciousness, but the most fully image based state is during REM, rapid eye movement. And that's so similar to being inside a virtual reality because around us, everywhere, we're surrounded by image, not physical substance. And when we're in that space, when we get immersed, when we get into the flow, we get into an altered state of consciousness. And in that altered state, I find it's a place when memory starts flowing in freely and when emotion has room to start coming up, which is very similar to dreaming. I found that happened the first time I went into Google Earth. Amir over at REM5 showed me that, and I decided to go walk down the street by the house I used to live in London. And I was astonished. At first, it was fun just hopping around and getting used to how to use this new medium to move around there. But all of a sudden, there was a shift when I felt like I was actually in that space, even though I know physically it wasn't true. But my imagination got so activated as it does in dreaming. And then the emotions came up, and I was flooded with such a sense of homesickness for that old neighborhood. That's where I lived when our first child was born. That's where I was a newlywed. So such a flood of memories came that haven't come when I've looked at photographs. Maybe the closest has come if I read a novel that's really immersive. But here I was actually recalling the experience of walking through the space. And that did trigger dreams again in the evening. It's the same thing when I'm creating. So I find that very often when I'm in the virtual space, I have the head set on. My phone is off because I can't possibly multitask and be in there. It would be super dangerous. Even trying to have a drink of water is dangerous. But that complete focus allows memory to start coming in and be a companion with me in the work. And then the dreams themselves start coming back in a way that is difficult for them to have a presence while I'm awake. And so I find that the whole process gets informed by all these other image based experiences that come to participate with me as I'm creating, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, really cool. Like we said in the last talk, we'll watch Sheila hop in, and 4 or 5 hours later, it's like, wait, yeah, she's still in there, she's still going strong. So um, that kind of longevity and being able to be super present. I mean, like you said, you can't do anything else when you're there except for create and iterate and practice like you do, and that's feels very different than maybe some of the traditional art forms where a lot of distractions can take place just by being in base reality, right? So that kind of maybe tees up my next thought for people that are looking to get into AR, VR, or other kind of interactive programs. Um, do you have any advice for them as far as whether or not they come from a traditional arts background or just want to try something new? What kind of would you say for people that are looking to try something out?
Just
Well, if
do
they
it.
live anywhere near REM5, I'd say, once you open again, stop there. But
Yeah.
otherwise, I don't know, because my only experience has been using a full headset. I think Matt would know other ways. But one thing that I did find helped me make the jump into VR when I got there was starting to create art digitally on my computer and then on an iPad. And just becoming familiar with interacting with these tools that I think of as so linear and so rational, and starting to find ways to play in that space did give me some facility when I moved into the virtual reality space. There's a lot of overlap.
Yeah, and on the development side, really, if you don't have a VR headset or any equipment like that, I would suggest just starting to learn Unity, even if it's making a regular 2D game, because all the coding that you're going to learn and all the design concepts still hold true when you decide to move to VR using Unity.
Mhm.
I was using some different 3D modeling software like Blender and Sketch, and found it really a struggle to make my ideas happen on the XY axis easily. And with Tilt Brush is super easy, so I really enjoyed that. And then just like Sheila and Matt and I and all the ESC artists are so different. There are so many different pathways in that it's really a wide open world. It's just mind boggling. And I've been doing a lot of research. For instance, in terms of education, if you go into a VR experience, you memorize things better than if you're reading it out of a book. And right now for COVID, training in hospitals are using VR to do that. Also for pain medication for hospitals, people will do a VR experience and kind of transport themselves. So the applications from medical to science, education to art are just huge and just expanding. So it's a very exciting time.
Yeah, well, and that leads into a perfect little REM5 shameless plug. We have been working on our education program uh, very hard for the last 3 weeks, where we're renting out Oculus Goes, and kids and adults can hop in and do a range of programs. And there's some really, really cool stuff out there. And I always think of, you know, I'm not super old, but if I would have had this as a kid, what that would be like to be growing up and how exciting that is. So that's what's really cool to see. Second shameless plug, on Thursday for our innovation lab chat that we're having, it's going to be all about art as well. We're kind of doing an art theme with this conversation as well this week. So that'll be a really good place for a lot of people to hop in and just, we're going to chat about Tilt Brush and AR programs and kind of a lot of ways where people can get started. And I think that's something that's really cool right now is like Matt kind of alluded to, and we all did, is ease of access to phone apps. John, we should definitely have a larger AR conversation, but I think what's really cool is to get started and to be on your phone and make something in augmented reality can take 5 minutes, and you can get really excited about it. And then that's where the art and the creativity, you can take it to multiple levels, um, to take it kind of beyond that first pass at. And I think that's what we're all doing in these rounds of iterations. It's like, oh man, what if I did this, or what if I brought in these assets or collabed with another artist? That's just super exciting. It's making it, on some, for people that maybe know how to actually like code from scratch, it's not always as great, but it's getting a lot of people introduced to the medium and just able to try something out themselves. So tune in for those conversations later this week for sure. Uh, awesome. Well, let's pop back. I got another question coming in here. Um, Matt, I wanted to tie a little bit back. You showed some of the work with Pixel Farm, and I wanted to dig a little bit deeper into how kind of your day job and your background uh, gets kind of mixed in. I mean, it looks like a lot of times work is very much play for you, which is super cool to
Yeah.
see. So for someone that does this for a living as well as artistically on the side, kind of what that's like, and for people that are interested in what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean there is a lot of overlap between what I do at Pixel Farm and what I do in my free time. I would say at Pixel Farm, a lot of the virtual reality experiences I work on creating are geared toward marketing and advertising. For
Mm,
example, A company may want to promote their products at a trade show or an event or something like that, or it might just be used for advertising as well. And then there is the creative and experiential side. So, like the thing I made for REM5, I did that all in my free time. Um, and basically, though, that had a lot of crossover with what I was doing at Pixel Farm already. So a lot of it is leveraging stuff you make for other projects. For example, I pulled code from one project to control the fish in the REM5 thing I did. So there's a lot of overlap with that. And a lot of my experimenting I do at Pixel Farm also is research and development, basically learning new technology and maybe making some sort of a cool creative tech demo, because all that technology can be used for other things. Um, yeah, I guess I don't know what else to say unless you.
Yeah. No, I think that's just a really cool tie-in where it's like, you know, having doing this actually as a job and getting paid for it, and then being able to take kind of those skills and those programs to take them to a more creative level. Um, and I think that's where a lot of trickle down comes from. Where my background from the advertising and marketing world is, they get to be able to have the big budgets and kind of push those envelopes, and that helps everyone else because stuff can become freeware afterwards, or you see something really cool that was done at scale and you want to kind of transpose it to your own idea. And so that's it's fun when brands and companies kind of go down that path and put
Yeah,
trust in these
definitely.
kind of experiences. So it
It's
is
good
good
when
for all of us.
they
Yeah.
encourage you to. It's good when they encourage you to be creative because that leads to a good product in the end, anyway.
Yeah. Let's pop back over to Philip quick. First off, you've got the best background probably of all of us because it's actually your awesome studio, and we can, for everyone at home, this is the other realm of Philip's work, and so that ties into my question of some of the creation, the projects from painting to creating the light sculptures to working in VR. How does your process change as far as maybe the planning stages to actually the physical execution of your projects?
Um, yeah, there's so many types of things I do. The paintings that you see behind me, I do sketches at first and then paint them using oil paints. And kind of the ironic thing is I really try very hard to make things look 3D. And there are these little glasses that you can put on that actually make them into 3D uh, and then my photography treatment is literally getting the from the painting. So I use my camera kind of like a paintbrush with weaving slow shutter speed motions,
Mhm.
and then I will use digital means to be able to manipulate, cut, paste, skew, and create new forms. And I found a technology that allows me to like make my images adhere to acrylic. And the beautiful thing about acrylic is that you can create forms that are not square. So
Mhm.
I created a series called Geometric Illuminations, and at the airport, I have quite a few um, installations there, both using the light boxes, and then I have some of these free floating pieces that are called Noyeds. Um, and basically the idea was, why does a painting have to be square? Why does a
Mhm.
painting have to be like, these are round? Or why does a photograph have to be round or square? And then why can't they fly? And so I've also entered with materials like dichroic film, and so that really reflects light and it's really interesting things with light and reflection. So all this experimentation, I think, was just a great foundation for getting into VR, because I've already been playing with the fixed reality,
Mhm.
and with Photoshop you're dealing with pixels, and then with when you're in uh, Tilt Brush Pro you're using voxels, so it's a X, Y, Z coordinate, and it's super easy. Like the tilt brush gives you colors, paint brushes, and then different forms that you can create. Like Sheila's the master of creating ovals and globes, squares, and has taught me how to do that. So the freedom to be able to create things easily within Tilt Brush, kind of using the foundation of what my artistic practice was, has just been just a great joy to be able to explore and create using it.
Yeah, no, for sure. We caught most of that, and Philip and I chatted before that the video might go in and out, but we were able to still hear you a little bit there, Philip. Um, but yeah, no, for sure. And also, as everyone saw more of Philip's studio, he's got like the best setup of all time. Once we can all go outside, we might have to do a little happy hour or something over there because it's such a cool creative space. Um, so thinking kind of about mediums and kind of practice and repetition. I know Sheila, that's something that's been really big for your work, coming from that very much artist background of learning how to do process and putting that into place. And I think you're definitely a poster child for figuring out how stuff works in Tilt Brush. So I'd love to have you just chat a little bit more about that of kind of that repetition versus free form, when you're in the virtual space.
Is it okay if I share screen then so I can show a couple of pictures?
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, let me see if I can figure out how to do this quickly then. I'll just open them up and see if I can get them to come up here.
Also,
All
back to
right.
Philip's comment about fixed reality, that might need to be one of our new terms. FR for everything that's not moving. Fixed reality. I
I
love
like
that.
it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm hoping that these will be able to show up on the screen here. You'll be able to see them. So, whoops.
Yep.
Can
I've
you
got
see
it on
that there?
mine.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
So, one of the things I do that's part of my creative process is I always turn to the dreaming. So when I'm working on a new project, and especially the first time I went into Tilt Brush, I had no idea how to start with this. I mean, I didn't have any physical paint to work with. I didn't have any physical tools to hold other than controllers. And it was really weird using my fingers on all these buttons to do things. I'm used to using my sense of touch so much. And then when I looked down, I had zero body reference. So I had no idea where I was in this space. So trying to get a point of view to position myself and position where I was going to create a composition was very, very confusing. So I just went to the dreams and I did what's called dream incubation, which is where I pose a question about something that I'm really working hard on in the day and it's emotionally meaningful to me. And it's my question was, how do I start? How do I deal with infinite space when I'm in there? And so I came back with several dreams that kept telling me to go back to the basics and that I've taught art for 40 years. I've been an artist for as long. Just go back to the foundational skills I use every time I try a new medium, if it's oil paint, if it's colored pencils, whatever. So I worked on trying to render space in two dimensions to have foreground, middle ground, and background, and created this digital image that I called Raven Moon. And then after that, let's see if I can get the next ones to come up. I hope so. I went and then tried to make it three-dimensional. So this is being very confusing how to get this up here. Just a second. Oh, there we go. Okay. So I'll find the second image. So then I made a tunnel book here. And so this tunnel book, as you can see, it's three dimensions. It's cut out and it actually goes back in space. And it's an accordion structure that allows me to open it wide or close it flat. And that got me starting to think about how to work in layers. And if I couldn't figure out how to work in three dimensions, almost like a sculpture, like you do in Tilt Brush, if I could create flat surfaces like I would on a stage setting with a curtain, part where the actors would be and then the background. So that's how I started out with this. And then I went on and created a piece in VR then, which I'll show you some of the pieces here. So I created this piece, which you can walk around it now. And the accordion now has become this big lifelike structure that I could actually walk around it as if I was like a mouse and step through the walls, which was very interesting. And that act of being able to step through the work when I'm working on it really stimulated my dreaming in ways I hadn't expected. So when I got inside of it, I could go up above it, for example, and then I noticed I was having many more dreams about flying at that point. So my creative spirit was really getting on board with this whole process. So I found that this play back and forth of getting stuck, really trying to figure it out, not knowing what the heck I'm going to do, and then going to the dreaming with a question, coming up with something that I have no idea what this means, but I'll give it a try. And since I couldn't figure out how to do foreground, middle ground, background in the VR space, I just went back into my studio and I did a print. And then from the print, then I tried to create a three-dimensional object. And then from the three-dimensional object, I went into the virtual reality with that as a model. So it's very similar to what Philip is describing, that as artists, we get a feeling, a sense, an image, and some kind of energy, and we start to try to embody it with the tools we have at our ready. But the virtual reality tools, I still didn't know what to do with them. Now I tend to go into the space with a feeling and don't do the preliminary sketches. I go in there and just try to figure it out. And what I'm doing now is after I muck around in there, then I come out and I start drawing. Then I come out and I start painting.
Mm.
Then I go back to dream about it and then go back into the virtual reality. So it's really interesting how in between working with image-based experiences, whether it's dreaming or virtual reality, I need to touch base with the physical body and create physical objects with physical medium in between. And that seems to really inform then what I'm doing in the tilt brush. So I'm seeing it as just another extension of my creative process, not as a separate thing that I'm doing from my painting or my books.
Mm-hmm.
It's all part of the same thing.
Yeah, no, your Raven Moon piece, when I first saw that and still, is such a cool way to show going from thought to dimensions to virtual, and it just is a really cool process, and shows how this medium can directly apply to your background and the traditional mediums and the traditional dimensions that we play in. Like Philip was mentioning, there's no need to be rectangular anymore. We can have depth, we can have shape, we can be spherical. It doesn't really matter anymore, which is kind of exciting.
Sheila, before we move on, Sheila,
Yeah.
is there any place where anyone who does have a VR headset can go see that work that you did? Is it uploaded anywhere?
I haven't quite figured that part out very well. So
Okay.
here's what happened is at REM5, I got a chance to try the state of the art equipment with apparently unlimited resources. And Amir told me that it was not possible to upload it into Poly, but which is a website, for those of you who don't know, Poly Google, that allows you to upload three-dimensional objects. But my recent things that I've created at home now, when I'm working on a Quest headset that has a lot of limitations compared to working with Tilt Brush on Hive headset at REM5, I have been able to upload that. So if you look for it, I have it, I think it's still private because I'm so new at this, but if you look for Shelter in Place, you'll see my latest work, which was based on a dream I had the day the shelter in place order came. And it was such a moving dream and so powerful and so hopeful that I wanted to spend at least a month in that space in virtual reality creating it so it would help me adapt to this situation and being at home as a full-time caregiver for my kids and grandchild.
That's awesome. Yeah, well, if you need any more help on how to share that stuff, Brian and Amir are a great resource. So,
and if you want to learn how to draw and paint, I'm here, and so is Philip.
Awesome.
Love it. Skill sharing. That's what we're all up to while we're stuck inside. We have a question actually from Amir that I wanted to kind of tee up to the whole group. So he was wondering, when you first got into VR and you were creating, what was some of the first thoughts that were coming to mind what was kind of going through your head as you got to see something like this for the first time and kind of something completely different?
Well, I guess I can take my first turn here. On the development side, I just gradually got into game development, and it just was unreal to me that I could create this world that other people could jump into and experience. And at the time, I created a level for a multiplayer game, and I didn't have to do any of the online networking, but just people could jump into my creation. And then I experienced VR for the first time. I tried a Vive, and then I was just immediately hooked. I needed to know how I could make stuff for that. And that just kind of, my passion was fueled in that regard. And I just kept trying to learn as much as I could.
Yeah.
For me, being an older artist coming into this, one of the big issues for me was body mechanics of how do I manage my body in this space with having this equipment on my head. It's a new weight, it's a different way of being in the space. How do I move when I have no body reference so that I can still stay really grounded in my body and my senses, and extending the memory of my senses into my use of color and creation of textures that won't be touched, but will be experienced with people's eyes, with their imagination. And so that took a lot of awareness in the beginning. One, so I wouldn't create any excess pain by getting new repetitive stress injuries. I don't need to do that. But because it's so immersive, I can totally lose track of time. So now I set a timer. I make sure I stay hydrated. I take breaks to stretch every 45 minutes or so. But that was a big challenge for me with this new medium.
It's hard to know when to stop sometimes, huh?
Yeah.
So I don't know if you have this memory of a Picasso picture where he's painting with light. He has this white light and he just looks so happy. And that's exactly what I thought of and how I felt when I first used the VR and Tilt Brush. And then secondly, I wanted to recreate a painting, which is using oil paints. And so there was like this whole reality I was trying to recreate. And Tilt Brush has a whole different set of brushes and forms and colors and light. And so it's a whole different vocabulary to use from an artistic standpoint. And then like you also have like the two different kinds of wands, and there's a grabber. So what you can do is like make it big by pulling out, or you can make it small. And what I discovered is that I didn't have to jump to make things, as big as I wanted to. I could make things small and then be able to build them as a small thing and then make them big afterwards. It might not sound like it makes a lot of sense, but if I was a potter, instead of just having a pot like this, I could actually like expand it so it would be as big as the room after I made it small. And so that to me was like a very liberating thing that I didn't anticipate I could do in Tilt Brush. And it's something I've used to great effect, I think, in creating my different environments.
You know, Philip brings up a really important question for painters, I think, and maybe a lot of visual artists who work physically in medium. But moving into Tilt Brush, it's a whole different aesthetic. And so at first, I think we try to work coming from what we're used to. And my work is very much based in the senses, and especially the sense of touch. And so coming into working purely with light in this abstract space was really something new to get used to. But one thing that really helped was going into Google Poly and looking at other people's work. I didn't realize at first that you could like something in there, and then when you're in the headset in Tilt Brush, you can click on it in there, and then all of a sudden you're inside of somebody else's artwork. And the ability to go up with the controllers and use this picking tool that's in there where you can click on something and find out exactly what brush they used. You can flip around to the color palette and find out exactly what color they used. And then you can make your own marks in the space and try to recreate it. That has been an incredible teaching tool. I mean, when you speak about Picasso, if I could go up and touch his paintings and get a hold of the brush he used and get to have him show me how to make the mark, wow, But you can do that in virtual reality and Tilt Brush, and that's been phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to some of the different paintings at REM5. So I went into Edvard Munch's The Scream. And once you pass the screamer, you just realize that he's having a bad day because it's a beautiful world. But you can go into Hokusai's Wave, and you can go into Starry Night by Van Gogh. So even if you're not an artist, you can go into like artworks that you love and experience them in a whole new way.
Yeah, Sheila, thanks for sharing that. I didn't know you could get that much detail from someone else's tilt brush painting. I didn't know you could go down to the brush stroke. That's awesome.
Yeah, just get out that picker tool and start clicking around, and you'll be really surprised what you discover.
That's really helpful to know for new tilt brush artists.
Well, especially since there isn't a textbook out there. That's the way I've been learning is I go into somebody's work, I click around, I make a few of those marks, then I go back into my own space and I try to build a new piece using the strokes I just learned in there. But it's funny because the process of learning is very much like my experience in Japan of studying traditional art forms. I used to be an apprentice to a Zen calligrapher, and my mother in law is a traditional Japanese dance master. And in those traditions, you meet with the master for maybe 15 minutes, half hour tops. You're not allowed to take notes. You're not allowed to record anything, but you have to just be totally present and experience the work and then go back and see what you can remember. And you keep learning it by repetition, by bringing it back into your body, then going back for another meeting. And I feel like my training in Zen based art forms is really helping me here in Tilt Brush, surprisingly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wanted to just hop into something you said just a little bit before that, Sheila. You mentioned how normally you work with multiple senses, um, and with the sensory collective, we're all trying to think through ways of touching on more than one sense at a time, if possible. So I just wanted to ask you guys if there are ideas you have for taking VR and making it more sensory, because it can be such an isolating experience, and that's one of the pros and cons of it. Or playing with senses, even as, I mean, Sheila, in your work where you're creating these environments and there's water moving, like your brain starts to make them up even though they don't exist. And I know Philip too, your piece had a custom soundtrack to it as well, so there were some plays on that. So I just kind of wanted to get that conversation started a little bit.
Well, that's something that I'm really interested in because my whole graduate work was based on this stuff. And I'm what's called a certified embodied imagination coach. So I'm really interested in the relationship between the senses and image based experiences. And in my training, it was working with memory and with dreaming. But one of the things I found is I use a tool called mimesis. And mimesis is when we purposefully activate the mirror neurons in the brain. So when we're a little baby and we're being held by mom and mom is going goo 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 and the baby's going ha ha, then we start mirroring each other. And that creates such a sense of connection, a sense of empathy and compassion, and it really helps us feel present. So when I'm creating my environments, it's like I almost over create. I've been wondering about that lately, but I want to get the people so immersed in there that they want to touch things. And when they start reaching out with the controller to touch things, to move around and get delighted trying to figure out how to get in and out around places, then I know that my mimesis function is getting activated. Their mirror neurons are getting activated, and their imagination is now starting to present the opportunity to feel like they are touching things. And that's what I start working towards and hope that they will get so immersed in the environment, like Philip was saying, where they want to just spend, 20 minutes, 30 minutes in there. Then I know that their senses are getting activated, even if they aren't physically touching something. I mean, sight and sound are easy to activate, but the sense of touch is one of the hardest ones.
Yeah, kind of piggybacking off of what Sheila says, sight and sound are maybe the easiest things to do. And as a developer in VR, if I'm creating something, I want to make sure it's cohesive in the sense that if something happens, there should be a sound associated with it. And actually, I do have somewhat of a sense of touch in VR because these controllers have a little haptic motor in them.
Mm.
So, for example, if I'm making an experience and someone needs to point at something and select it, and then this big thing happens, the controller can rumble, and that actually adds a lot to the experience. And no one thinks of it as, oh, my controller's rumbling. They think of it, their brain interprets it as, oh, this big thing is happening. I can feel these vibrations. So we have somewhat of a sense of touch in VR. There have been attempts to make haptic gloves and force feedback and things like that, but that's not ready for the consumer yet. That's very, very expensive. So haptic motors are what we've got for now. And as far as taste and smell go, that is a little more tricky. Actually, Brian, maybe you could elaborate on what you did for Experiential Sensory Collective. That kind of got into
Yeah.
smell and tasting.
Yeah, for sure. I was gonna stay out of this one, but no, that's okay.
I'm
Yeah,
bringing you into it.
yeah. Spoiler alert: I curate and participate in our ESC events, and this year I teamed up with Ian Mack, who is a mixologist and botanicus who creates soundscapes, and the three of us made a projection mapped drink experience that also had a soundtrack to it. So we hit on sight, sound, taste, and smell, and I guess maybe the feeling of the glass. So we tried to get pretty close to a very multi-sensory experience. So that was cool. That was something that had kind of been on my mind for a while. There's been a cool mix of kind of projection mapping in the culinary and the drink arts. So this was kind of our play on that. But yeah, I don't know what'll be next in store. I working with and doing visuals and audio visual kind of going together as performance and experience is something that I work with too. So like you said, those ones are sometimes the easiest to get to, but not always the easiest to make kind of go up and above and beyond. So I think that's always something that we're all trying to kind of recreate. Something that was interesting and I think applies to all of our work as well. That's not maybe seen as much of a sense or touch, but like your sense of space and movement to me seems like again not a traditional sense, but in Sheila's work when we were at Brookfield, what was that in December or January? Uh, she was having people, you know, on the ground and being in a tilt brush painting, you need to physically move your body to get different vantage points, which I think is always really cool. And in Philip's work, you were literally walking through slices of a painting. So that's something where maybe not as traditionally seen as a sense, and touchless interaction, which is going to be all the rage now that we're not allowed to touch anything anymore. Um, those are kind of cool ways where people are using their body to need to be a part of a piece and to experience it where they have agency over that. Again, different than a very traditional, one direction. I am here looking at a painting. It's well, I'm here. I'm down here. I'm crawling through a virtual tunnel. I'm using controllers to manipulate something. So the sense of virtual space and you know movement is kind of a cool thing that a lot of us are needing to think about when people are in a space, which is pretty cool. Um, well, we're getting kind of probably close to the end of our time here, and I wanted to wrap up. I'm going to check for a couple more questions if anyone has any. Um, but maybe just to kind of wrap up, I wanted to get everyone's thoughts on what have you been experimenting with? Have you been learning new things kind of in this weird time that we're in, or what's been kind of exciting for everyone?
Well, I've been having a fun time at home every day with my 6-year-old grandson, and he's very curious about what does grandma do? So, of all things, I've started teaching him how to do virtual reality art. And
Awesome.
that's been really fun to step inside of a very typical 6-year-old's drawing, but now it's three-dimensional.
Yeah.
And watching how well he takes to this, that's been super fun.
Awesome.
I've been spending a lot of time researching other artists who are doing VR art other VR museum spaces and other companies that are focused on using art for health purposes and healing purposes. And just realizing how much energy and investment has been going into this field of VR and AR and MR. And I'm just really excited by the exponential growth that this field is going to have in the next few years and being a part of it.
My focus during this time here is learning multiplayer networking. So with the rise of social distancing and people not being able to physically be together, I think we're going to see a big spike in connected and shared experiences and increased demand in that. So I'm focusing on learning how to create VR experiences in a way that others can join you and be there with you.
Well, and the last thing that I'm working on is taking a lot of notes. And right now I'm working on writing the Dream Artist's Guide to Tilt Brush.
Oh,
Cool.
sweet. Well, we're all excited to dig into that and kind of get to see what everyone's been working on. Thanks again for joining and talking about everything in this weird time. We'll have to do it again. I think, like I said, I'm going to reach out to John and Sherston and a couple of the other artists and REM5 and hopefully do another one of these in the next week or so. Thanks for everyone who tuned in on the live stream and in Zoom. I'm Brian from REM5. Once we get back up and running, we invite any of you to reach out to come over and try out Tilt Brush or a lot of the other really cool programs that are being developed right now. We've got camps coming up this summer where kids can use design tools that Ford and Bugatti are using to design cars. We've got a lot of really cool stuff going on. But yeah, thanks again to our artists. Hopefully, we'll have an ESC 3.0 on the books for this fall. Knock on all of the wood. But if not, maybe we'll do something virtually and kind of think through some ways where we can continue to share what people are making and let people, experience art in new ways. So tune in and
thanks for putting this on, Brian.
Yeah, no, thanks for joining.
It was such a pleasure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good to see all your faces.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, guys, and thanks everyone for tuning in, and we will chat again soon.
Sweet dreams.
Sounds good.
Yeah. See you guys.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.